Take this job and shove it.
10 years ago, on a cold, dark night.
Neon once flickered above every two-lane highway in America, promising cheap beer, jukebox miracles, and a chance to see tomorrow's renegade king before Nashville tamed him. Step inside any of those roadside bars now and you'll find the posters sun-bleached, the stages empty, and the voices echoing only in the memories of patrons who are themselves turning to dust. Today, we're pushing back through the cigarette haze of history to trace 21 country legends who rode applause like a thunderstorm but checked out to silence. Their chart-topping dreams ended not in encore confetti, but in whispering hospital rooms, cheap motel beds, or half-remembered nursing homes where nobody bothered to tune the radio. Johnny Paycheck didn't just sing about telling the boss off. He lived that attitude until it finally turned on him. After courtroom brawls, a prison stint for firing a gun in a bar fight, and endless bouts with coke and unmarked pills, he wound up in a care home southwest of Nashville, where the only stage was a linoleum-tiled cafeteria. Nurses had no idea the frail man asking for extra grits had once filled arenas. His gold records hung in a pawn shop downtown. When he slipped away in February 2003, the label released a single paragraph, but stations were already looping younger voices about tractors and beer. The applause never followed. Backstage, Hank Williams burned through life faster than his own songs predicted, a skeleton in cowboy boots by the time most men finish college. December 31st, 1952 found him in Knoxville, begging a teenager to drive him to a West Virginia gig. Icy roads, morphine shots, and whiskey turned the Cadillac into a rolling coffin. By dawn, the driver realized the singer in the back seat was motionless, ticket stubs fluttering out of his suit pocket like unpaid promises. Nashville's power brokers held polite memorials, but barroom philosophers muttered truth. The most lonesome voice in country music died exactly as he sang, alone. Fame rode shotgun, grief driving. Lefty Frizzell could bend a syllable until it sounded like velvet, inspiring entire generations. Yet in 1975, he bent himself into a bottle he never escaped. Record execs called his phrasing old-fashioned, canceling sessions and leaving him to haunt dive bars where the jukebox still knew his name. By July, cirrhosis swelled his midsection so badly he looked 9 months pregnant, but he kept promising one more comeback show. Instead, he collapsed in a shabby Brentwood rental, telephone unplugged so creditors couldn't interrupt the wheeze of his final breath. The curtain fell without an encore. Ever. Keith Whitley's voice could make heartache sound like redemption, yet redemption never quite found him. On May 9th, 1989, signed glossy photos littered his Nashville condo like unpaid bills while he rehearsed tragically with a half-gallon of bourbon. His wife left for a brief interview. 60 minutes later, she returned to silence, the answering machine blinking with requests he would never answer. The autopsy blamed acute alcohol poisoning, but old friends said it was the long loneliness between studio takes that really killed him. Stardom never learned CPR. Mel Street sang about borrowed angels, yet spent his birthdays wrestling borrowed demons. On October 21st, 1978, the morning he turned 39, no record exec called, no band knocked, and the radio ignored him. Dressed in a rhinestone jacket that still smelled of stale smoke, he sat beneath framed county fair ribbons and penned a short apology to fans. Minutes later, a single gunshot folded the silence. Newspapers labeled it a self-inflicted exit, glossing over years of untreated depression, dwindling bookings, and humiliating side jobs. Dreamless now. David Houston once crooned, "Almost persuaded," so sincerely that Sunday sermons quoted him. He even beat the Beatles on the charts. Fast forward to November 1993 and he's warming up behind a county fair livestock pen, changing into a suit while pigs squeal on the other side of plywood. Moments before showtime, a thunderclap pain drops him, a ruptured aneurysm steals his speech, then his breath. Fairgoers keep cheering the mule pull finals, unaware a Grammy winner lies feet away on the straw. The spotlight never reached the ambulance doors. Bob Luman once fused rockabilly swagger with country charm so effortlessly, teenagers tore up dance floors trying to keep up. By December 1978, that swagger coughed itself into Vanderbilt Hospital, and because every private room was full, his gurney ended up beneath a flickering corridor bulb. Family got lost in the holiday crowd. Radio reps sent generic fruit baskets that never arrived. He joked with nurses about charting from a hallway, but pneumonia tightened its grip. After midnight, his heart quit and staff slid a curtain around the bed nobody had bothered to label. The man who sang "Let's Think About Living" left this world while orderlies discussed basketball scores steps away, uncelebrated. Farron Young's drawl once filled coliseums, and his investments made him the unofficial landlord of Music Row, yet retirement treated him like a ghost renter. By Christmas 1996, declining airplay and health issues boxed him into a drab condo, its walls crowded with gold records no one wanted to reissue. Neighbors heard a gunshot at lunchtime. The singing sheriff had issued his final warrant against despair. He survived long enough to tell paramedics he felt forgotten, then slipped away while holiday jingles jingled on the ambulance radio. Radio stayed silent for days. Stonewall Jackson once roused Opry crowds with "Waterloo," shaking rafters. Yet, by his 80s, the same institution shuffled him to afternoon slots, then none at all, forcing him to sue for age discrimination. Weekends saw him in a lawn chair outside the gate, autographing bargain bin CDs while tourists hurried past. December 2021 brought strict pandemic rules: no visitors, just masked nurses who read his chart to learn the hits. At 3 a.m., his heart slipped into a long, flat tone, the monitor offering the last ovation he'd ever hear. By sunset, the lawsuit and the legend were forgotten by management. Tom T. Hall spent decades spinning warm tales about barbershop gossip and watermelon wine, reminding listeners that ordinary lives mattered. But in August 2021, the storyteller retreated to his Kentucky farm, bolting the gate against a world streaming songs in algorithmic bursts, too quick for nuance. Neighbors heard one sharp crack echo across the holler. Authorities later called it a self-chosen goodbye. Inside, they found Grammys gathering dust, half-finished lyrics on yellow legal pads, and a silent phone that once rang non-stop. Radio offered a brief tribute between commercials, skipping his deeper cuts. Hall had chronicled loneliness for everyone else. Fate insisted he experience the closing verse firsthand. Rex Griffin wrote songs Hank and the Beatles would later borrow, yet most listeners never knew the writer. Chronic illness kept him off the road, and by 1959, tuberculosis, diabetes, and cheap whiskey left him stranded in a shabby New Orleans hotel. Payphone operators refused collect calls to publishers. Royalty statements were in the mail. Housekeepers found a guitar case stuffed with rejection letters and a pawn ticket for the instrument itself. His body went to charity burial unclaimed, while jukeboxes nationwide kept spinning his melodies under other voices. Genius misplaced, fame delayed. Ferlin Husky's velvet croon once tamed honky-tonks and Sunday choirs, yet his final curtain rose under hospital fluorescence in March 2011. Heart disease tethered him to an oxygen tank coiled around gold records a friend propped bedside for inspiration. Young nurses Googled the patient, amazed he'd once mentored Buck Owens. He joked the tubes were stage props and promised another tour. Then one afternoon, his laugh faded into a sigh that never returned. News outlets ranked his passing beneath celebrity gossip. In the digital age, legends need fresh algorithms to stay alive. Johnny Horton chased history on stage with The Battle of New Orleans, yet history ambushed him on a Louisiana bridge at 1:30 a.m., November 1960. A drunk driver slammed head-on into his Cadillac, twisting metal and melody alike. Hours earlier, Horton had warned bandmates he felt a dark omen. They laughed it off. Now they clung to wreckage. Paramedics found a Bible on the dash, its margins scribbled with song ideas that would never reach vinyl. The crash stole him at 35, but the bigger theft came later when radio treated his catalog as novelty. Memory stalled in midnight. Jim Ed Brown spent half a century harmonizing about Papa Tops and family bands, yet cancer pressed mute in June 2015. Only a week before, the Opry surprised him with Hall of Fame induction. He clutched the medallion like a backstage pass to tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. Hospital corridors echoed with oxygen pumps, not applause. Reporters chased viral dress debates, so his obituary sank beneath clickbait. The medallion hangs in a museum, but the hand that earned it rests forever silent. Fans learned the news from late-night reruns. Billy Walker, the smiling gentleman who crossed the Brazos at Waco, spent more nights on the Opry stage than in his own bed. Yet May 2006 found him driving a modest van home from an under-promoted Alabama gig because flights cost too much. Past midnight, a curve grabbed the wheels. The van rolled, claiming Walker, his wife, and 2 bandmates. Rescue crews scattered lyric sheets across asphalt like confetti at a parade nobody attended. News anchors mispronounced his name, calling him Willie before switching to weather. The self-funded demo tracks in the glove compartment never found a label. Promises shattered with the windshield. Del Reeves once painted the interstate with "Girl on the Billboard," yet retirement reduced him to a porch chair near Lebanon, Tennessee, waving at 18-wheelers he could still identify by engine note. Royalty checks dwindled as classic country stations switched to bro country, and his health followed suit. In January 2007, the trucker poet slipped away during an afternoon nap, television tuned to reruns he'd hosted decades earlier. Editors preferred headlines about a pop diva's rehab stay, so coverage was scant. At the funeral, the procession paused beneath an overpass so truckers could blare horns in salute, filling the void left by mainstream indifference. The highway remembered him loudly. Johnny Russell turned rednecks, white socks, and cheap beer into chart gold, laughing louder than anyone at his own punchlines. But by 2001, unchecked diabetes forced surgeons to remove both legs, exiling the 6-foot clown prince to a wheelchair he dubbed his mobile bar stool. He still played the Opry seated, joking half a body meant double the soul, yet bookings grew scarce. In July, infection spread. He spent his final day rewriting a gospel tune nobody has heard. When he passed that night, the Opry dimmed lights for 30 seconds. Tourists thought it was a lighting test. Comedy cannot bribe mortality. Billy Joe Shaver wrote outlaw gospel so raw even Waylon flinched, yet mainstream fame always danced just out of reach. After a bar parking lot shooting turned courtroom spectacle, he joked on the stand, "If you don't love Jesus, go to instantly becoming meme material. But memes don't pay medical bills. On October 28, 2020, a massive stroke silenced the poet inside a Waco hospital. Pandemic restrictions meant friends could only text goodbye. Cable news lumped him into a scroll beneath election chaos. The man who called himself an old chunk of coal left unpolished yet still shining to those who listened. Jerry Wallace crooned Primrose Lane into wedding dance immortality, yet by 2008 he was living in a riverside care facility where bingo nights drew bigger crowds than his memories. Staff assumed he was a retired insurance clerk until they Googled the gold record claim on his intake form. Heart failure came quietly after breakfast. Administratively, he was just another discharge. Local papers ran 6 sentences. National outlets skipped entirely. His guitar went to Goodwill and the facility stereo resumed top 40 pop before lunch trays rolled out. Somewhere couples kept dancing to his hit, never realizing the singer's final applause was a polite nurse closing a door. Fame can fade faster than silence. Wynn Stewart laid the bricks for Bakersfield Sound, but while his protégés raked in Grammys, he struggled to pay rehearsal space rent. By July 1985, heart disease had him canceling club gigs, yet he still rewired old amplifiers in his garage, dreaming of one more neon-lit tour. One midnight, his chest seized. The Stratocaster he'd been polishing slipped, twanging a single dying note. Newspapers called him Wayne. Owens and Haggard sent wreaths, but radio programmers preferred fresher catalogs. His unpainted garage door became his last marquee, visible only to neighbors taking out trash. History forgets its architects until the walls crumble. Dottie West blazed trails with glittery homemade stageware and songs about independence, yet bankruptcy stripped her down to a borrowed car by 1991. Running late for an Opry appearance, she told a teenage driver to floor it, unaware a concrete barrier lurked beyond a blind curve. The crash shattered her spine. Surgeons fought for days, but debts weren't the only fractures. Tabloids obsessed over money woes, not her pain. She passed during surgery, the Opry dedicating a show she couldn't watch. Creditors filed claims before funeral guests arrived, seizing costume sequins that once lit arenas. Nashville traffic moved on quicker than its former queen. Glamour exited through a crash. The lights of Lower Broadway still dazzle, yet each bulb flickers with names few tourists remember. These 21 voices once defined honky-tonk Saturdays, wedding first dances, and heartbreak road trips. But when the cash registers quieted, the industry looked away. Their stories prove that behind every million-selling single lurks a backstage panic or a silence too heavy for a microphone to break. We celebrate fame in spotlights, yet forget it survives on fragile wiring, health, luck, and the fickle taste of programmers deciding which memories deserve rotation. The forgotten endings you've just heard aren't anomalies. They're the shadow Nashville sweeps beneath rhinestone rugs. Next time an algorithm queues up a vintage track, let it play through instead of skipping to the latest remix. When you hum along, you resurrect a moment these artists died believing the world had discarded. Maybe remembrance is the encore no chart can measure, the standing ovation that arrives decades late but still counts. Turn the volume loud enough for hospital corridors, nursing homes, and lonely farms to feel the vibration. Because legends never truly vanish, they simply wait for someone somewhere to press play again. Right now. Maybe that's the small act of rebellion our heroes would appreciate. So here's a challenge while the credits roll. Pick one forgotten record each month, cue it up, and play it start to finish while you drive the same cracked highways they once toured. Let the steel guitar fill the silence your phone usually owns. Tell the algorithm you want stories with rust around the edges. Confessions taped on reel-to-reel, not pristine plastic perfection. Then talk about what you hear. Post a jagged lyric under a neon-lit photo. Teach your kids to recognize a pedal steel solo. Dare your local bar's touchscreen jukebox to dig deeper than the top 20 drinking anthems. Remember that cultural memory isn't preserved by corporations. It's passed hand to hand, voice to voice, speaker to soul. Every click you spend on these ghosts drops a coin in the jukebox of history, buying them one more midnight spin. And if you're a dreamer with a guitar leaning in the corner, learn a verse from one of these lost champions. Let their cadence guide your own fragile beginnings, because nothing inoculates against ego like playing a song whose writer died broke. When the applause starts to sting instead of soothe, you'll remember Johnny Paycheck trading stadium roars for cafeteria clatter and find the courage to walk outside for fresh air before the industry welds the doors shut. Finally, pledge mercy for the stars still blazing. Drop a comment when you notice dark circles blooming under a performer's eyeliner. Praise the ballad hidden on track 9. Mail a fan letter that says simply, "You're heard." One sincere sentence can echo louder than any arena. Do that, and you may tilt destiny just enough that today's headliner doesn't become tomorrow's trivia question. Because in the end, legacies aren't carved by granite sculptors, they're quilted nightly by listeners who refuse to forget. Spin the record, share the tale, light the neon again. That's how you keep the highway glowing long after the headlight beams burn out and the posters crumble. It's how you prove the thunder was real, not just special effects on a stage now swallowed by cobwebs. So adjust the dial, crack the window, and let a lost voice ride shotgun. The road is wide, the night is young, and memory is always looking for company willing to keep singing until sunrise finally breaks again.